Well, for so many Americans, student debt is a financial ball and chain. They drag it around for decades. When it comes to getting a college education in this country, it's becoming more and more expensive. Let's take a look at some of the stats. Tuition costs have risen about 600% over the last 30 years. Average in-state tuition has risen by 8% just in the last year. And those who graduated in 2010 had an average of $25,250 in student debt. Now, in July, the interest rate on student debt is scheduled to double from 3.4% to 6.8%. President Obama has brought this issue front and center, and now a vote in the House of Representatives happened today to try to prevent that increase from happening. So both Republicans and Democrats agree that interest rates on student loans should not double, but the two sides disagree on how to pay for it. Republicans want to offset costs by taking money from a program within the new health care law. Democrats say oil companies and wealthy Americans should be taxed a higher rate to offset those costs. Well, today in the House, just a few hours ago, actually, they passed the Republican version, which is sure to be vetoed by the president. But let's talk now about the student loan issue itself with Larson, an activist with the Occupy Student Debt campaign. Hey there, Ann. On one hand, this move to stop interest rates from rising is a step. But it seems to me there's a lot bigger problem here. Talk a little bit about that.
The current discussion going on between the president and the Republicans about student loan interest rates is really just a distraction from the larger issue, which is the growing cost of higher education, the exploding cost of tuition, and the fact that on Wednesday of this week, we surpassed $1 trillion in total student debt. So neither the Republicans or the Democrats are talking about really the fundamental problems that we're facing.
Yeah, some people are even likening it to putting, a Band-Aid on a tumor and sending the patient home. It's really just something very small here. We put up some numbers before. If you look at the timeline, though, of what's going on here, Ann, you've got state funding decreasing, which means schools then raise tuition. And in many cases, the federal government has stepped in to fill the holes with loan money. So when students come out, they face not just a much tougher job market, they also have the loans piled on. Talk a little bit about the effects of this cycle.
Well, I think it's important to know that this is a complicated issue, and what happens is the states reduce funding to higher education. But the other part of the story is that oftentimes college administrators are already running their colleges like corporations and like financial entities. And so what they do is they pledge students' tuition to Wall Street banks in order to secure better bond ratings in capital markets. So what you'll see is, for example, in places like the University of California, California is facing a fiscal crisis, many problems going on there with higher ed, reduced funding for higher ed, but there's still plenty of construction projects going on campus, and that's because student debt has been pledged to Wall Street. In essence, college administrators are promising Moody's and the bond raters that they will raise student tuition in the indefinite future in order to secure loans for capital projects, and the revenue streams of those projects are going to be controlled by the 1%. So this is a complicated issue. It has to do with reduced state funding, but it also has to do with the collusion, frankly, between college administrators and the government and Wall Street.
I think it's an important point. I think a lot of people just don't know the extent. Most people don't know the extent. We talk about for-profit colleges, places like University of Phoenix and Kaplan University. The fact is, a lot of regular colleges, even state schools, do a lot of profit making, I guess you could say. But Ann, I want to switch gears for a second. You are with the Occupy Student Debt campaign, which is different from the group Occupy Student Debt. That group wants to make some changes to current legislation for student loans. What steps is your group calling for?
Well, we differ somewhat with Occupy Student Debt. We are a working group of Occupy Wall Street, and we have a slightly different take. Occupy Student Debt and some other groups are working more with a reformist strategy. They're working through the legislature and through congressional bills, lobbying the government, things like that. And in the spirit of Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Student Debt campaign, we believe that, number one, student debts are illegitimate from the beginning, and it makes no sense to reform the current system. And number two, the time for petitioning the government is long past. As I've just described, the government has been colluding with higher education officials and with Wall Street to raise the price of tuition for decades. And So the idea that we would now go to these same people and ask for their help, or put ourselves in the position of supplicants, seeking help from the same people who got us into this mess, frankly, is a little bit ridiculous. So the Occupy Student Debt campaign, the centerpiece of our campaign, is a pledge of student debt refusal. And everyone can read about that on our website, occupystudentdebtcampaign.org. And what we are proposing is, rather than concede power to the 1%, that we have a pledge on our website that people can sign to stop paying their student loans once 1 million others have also signed the pledge.
All right.
And so that's our strategy.
All right. Ann Larson, activist with the Occupy Student Debt Campaign. We appreciate you coming on the show. Lots to talk about there.